Hey friends, welcome back to the Dwelling Place podcast. We are so glad that you are joining us today, and we hope you're encouraged and inspired as you listen to this week's message.
No one plans to mess up. I'm not aware of anybody in my life and in my experiences and in my conversations that have planned to mess up. They've made this conscious decision. If I get tempted in this area of my life over the next 3 weeks, then I'm going to do it because I know that it's going to wreck my life. And nobody plans to do it. But I would also argue that very few of us would plan not to. And that's where this becomes very challenging. I don't know of anybody that's planned to file for bankruptcy, planned to be hooked on porn, planned to be addicted to approval through social media feeds. I don't find or know of anybody that intentionally goes out pursuing that. Nobody plans to mess up, but let's plan not to. What we do is we magnify the experience. FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's a real thing. People deal with it all the time. And so we magnify the experience and we minimize the cost. What we should be doing is we should be taking some time to amplify the cost or magnify it, have a serious consideration of what the worst case scenario will be. So if you're crippling in gambling debt, it starts off as a little bit of Friday night fun with the NRL or with this or with that or with a fight or whatever it might be. And it's just like, I'm just having a bit of fun. And all we do is we amplify the experience, we magnify the experience of the adrenaline rush, but we take no time to consider worst case scenario cost. And all of a sudden, you've run up debts. All of a sudden, you've mortgaged your house further. All of a sudden, your car's getting repossessed and your family wasn't even aware of it. So your family starts to fall apart. Your kids now have no respect for who you are, and things are desperately falling apart. Maybe if we just considered worst case scenario, the experience might not have felt so attractive. The direction of my life will be determined by the quality of my decisions. Decisions shouldn't be based on what feels good in the moment, but they should be based upon who we want to be in the future. It seems like storm season's back on. And it's really interesting for people that haven't had to navigate their way through storm seasons, because what we do is we get to storm season and we sort of like cover our eyes and close our ears and just hope that the storm goes over fast and that there's not much damage. But people that have been seasoned through life and understand what storms are about and what they bring, it's all about the preparation. Are the trees trimmed? Are there any branches that look like they may fall off? They're not connected, they're not strong. Are the gutters full? Are they overflowing with leaves? Because if we don't trim the trees and we don't clean the gutters, then all of a sudden our life is in this moment of disaster, this moment which could have been sidestepped. It could have been, we could have got around it if we had prepared ahead, if we had made different decisions. A number of years ago, I was really wrestling through God, who have you called me to be? Who do you want me to be? And I took a moment to write out a whole lot of things, and just over time I continued to refine what it was, and basically I've got this bit of paper now which I would call an internalized narrative. God, this is who I believe you've called me to be. And they're just short statements around who I believe God has called me to be. And when something comes up, when temptation comes towards us, all of a sudden I have a decision to make. Am I going to make that decision based upon my feelings, or am I going to make that decision based upon the values that I believe God has instilled within me for who He has called me to become? So if I'm tired and grumpy, and one of my statements about who I want to be is a cheerful, uplifting dad, and I'm tired and I don't really want to spend time with the kids, then I have to make a decision. Am I going to submit to my emotion, or am I going to submit to the values of my life? Now, thank goodness I never made a statement around being a cheerful dad. But these are the things that we have to consider. When I'm clear on the God-shaped values in my life, it minimizes the opportunity of emotions to undermine my future. Have you ever given in to temptation? Have you ever regretted it? And then have you ever got frustrated by the cycle of sin that you now live in? Don't worry, Paul lived in it. Romans 7:15 and then 18 and 19. I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. So Scripture, I believe, gives us some insights into how we can overcome, how we can walk through the challenges of life in relation to temptation. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 13 says this, "Be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and be strong." Matthew 26:41 says, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Be ready, be on guard, watch, be prepared. Why? Why should we prepare to overcome temptation? The first thought is this: because the devil has an agenda for you. Even the devil has a vision and a mission for your life. And in the absence of the vision for yourself, he will fulfill the gap. He will endeavor to outwork his agenda. All through Scripture, the Garden of Eden, the story of Job, the temptations of Jesus. In lacking a vision for ourselves, the devil will happily fulfill that role. John 10, verse 9 and 10 says this. This is Jesus speaking. He goes, "Yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and will find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life." This is the mission. This is the vision and the agenda of the enemy for our life: to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So what we do in our modern Western society is we want to dilute the emphasis of the devil. We want to dilute the emphasis around the oppressor, and we want to mystify it all. We allow it to become mysticism. We dilute spiritual things and we replace them. We don't recognize the active roles of the enemy in our life, and we introduce these replacement characters like coincidence, characters like fate, characters like the universe. And we displace the power of the enemy and we replace it with these other characters. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. And chapter 2, verse 11, it says this: "I wrote to you," so Paul's speaking about forgiveness in this letter, and he goes, "And I wrote to you, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes." The enemy has evil schemes and plans and agendas for our life, and we can either ignore it or we can be aware of it. So the devil has an agenda for you. The second thing is this: you are not as strong as you think you are. Our culture continues to reinforce our strength, how good you are, how many pats on the back I can get. We are way better than what we think. you are not as strong as you think. It is one of the most consistent conversations that I have with myself and that I can have with others. And the interesting thing is, people that believe they are strong in a particular area of their life usually find out how weak they truly are when the temptation continues to up its ante. We need to be aware of our weaknesses, and that we aren't as strong as we think we are. The ones that think they're strong enough end up living in a trail of pain and frustration and hurt and anger. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall." Let's just be self-aware. Let's just take a bit of an audit of our weaknesses and our true strengths. There's this phrase, there's this language called restraint bias. It's the first time I'd ever heard of it. And this is what the research behind this concept of restraint bias says. It shows how people overestimate our ability to resist temptation. We all think that we have this great ability. Yeah. I would never compromise for this. I would never take money to change my opinion on something. I could never be put in a situation where I'd be unfaithful on my spouse. But there's this concept, restraint bias. I overestimate my ability to resist temptation. You think you can resist more than you're able until there's a white chocolate cheesecake. Why do we overestimate? Because resisting temptation takes energy. It takes self-control. It takes willpower. And all of these things are like a limited resource. And so what we find is we can be in our work environment and we are so self-disciplined around our anger issues. Self-disciplined because there's a reputation at stake. There's what people think of me. And so we are so disciplined in our workplace that we aren't going to blow up at the person in the office next door or the boss that sent that email. But we only have a limited amount of resource, a limited amount of space for that willpower and that emotional strength and the ability to resist. So what we do is we wait until we get home, and all of a sudden, we're either blowing up at our parents, blowing up at our brothers and sisters, blowing up at our kids, our wife, and all of a sudden we see this true concept of restraint bias. Why should we prepare to overcome temptation? Because the devil has an agenda for you and you're not as strong as you think. So how can we prepare to overcome temptation? How do we prepare to be ahead of the game in this idea of overcoming temptation? Here we go. First thing is this: we move the line. The line is how close we get to sin. My brother and I used to play this game in the back of the car. It wasn't really a game. He used to get really annoyed with me. And so he would want to hit me. He would want to violently attack me. And so he would draw this imaginary line just straight down the seat. You go over it, you're going to cop it. No matter how violent that threat was, I would just always just sit my finger right on that imaginary line, because it's just what we do as people. We always just want to push the line. We need an ability to move the line back. How close can I live to the line? This is why 10 commandments turns into 613 laws, because we just have to keep getting closer and closer to the line. Keep defining that commandment for me. Keep defining that law for me. Get ahead of the game. Put distance between myself and temptation. The second thought is this: evaluate the cost. So we move the line. The second one is this: we evaluate the cost. Numbers 32:23 says, you'll be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin, it'll find you out. Don't allow 5 minutes of sin to wreck a whole story and a whole lifetime of serving. We've seen it so much. We've seen the devastating stories of lives and people that have worked so hard and built so much trust with people, and then in the background, under the carpet, wherever it may be, it's like the experience was magnified and maybe the cost wasn't considered. So we move the line, we magnify the cost, and the final thought is this: we organise our exit. We plan for an exit. Genesis 39, verse 6 and 7 says this: Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. Come and sleep with me, she demanded. This would have been easy, I'm presuming, for Joseph to give in. He'd gone through some tragic circumstances in this nation, and then he was in this position of power, or at least being seen and considered and bring into a closed circle of people that were in power. And he has this attractive, powerful woman pursuing him. He's single, he's good looking, he's all alone, no one finds out. That is the temptation. He has an ability or an opportunity, if he wants to blame God, to put it on God's shoulders. God, why did you allow me to be sold into slavery? Why have you allowed me into this position? God, I'm putting this on you. And all of a sudden, he removes his own personal responsibility, and we end up using our disappointments, our hurts, our frustrations to justify our disobedience. Genesis 39:12 says this: but he left his cloak in her hand and he ran out of the house. Joseph was ahead of the game. Joseph had to understand his own weakness. He knew that he was not strong enough to resist the temptation, and he had to run. Would you stand with me this morning? 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13 says this: and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. No one plans to mess up. I'm not aware of anybody in my life and in my experiences and in my conversations that have planned to mess up. They've made this conscious decision. If I get tempted in this area of my life over the next 3 weeks, then I'm going to do it because I know that it's going to wreck my life. Now, nobody plans to do it. But I would also argue that very few of us would plan not to. And that's where this becomes very challenging. I don't know of anybody that's planned to file for bankruptcy, planned to be hooked on porn, planned to be addicted to approval through social media feeds. I don't find or know of anybody that intentionally goes out pursuing that. Nobody plans to mess up, but let's plan not to. This is what I want to leave you with this morning. Where are you vulnerable? Where am I vulnerable? Self-awareness is our greatest safety mechanism. And you need to be honest, because our enemy understands who you are sometimes more than you're willing to acknowledge. What are the areas of my life that have gaps in them? What are the areas, whereas if I was an enemy to myself, how would I attack me? You might have a clean sheet when it comes to pornography and you think you're as pure as Jesus. But your pride, it's like an open door. It's like an access point for the enemy. There's the opportunity. You might be self-controlled and even-tempered, and it's like you've mastered your emotions. But there's this spirit of MasterCard that has itself wrapped around your heart. There's an opportunity. We can overcome future temptations by decisions that we make today. We don't need to be superhuman in our strength to continually resist temptation. We can look forward, we can be self-aware, and we can make decisions today about our future tomorrow.
Thanks for spending time with us today. To hang out again the next time an episode drops, make sure you subscribe. See ya!